Today, we're diving into a medical mystery that starts with something as simple as a fever. But as you'll see, it quickly spirals into a global health emergency. We're going to see how the fight to save 2 children's lives uncovers the terrifying rise of superbugs. These are bacteria that are literally learning to outsmart our most powerful medicines. I want you to just imagine this for a second. Your child is sick, you do what you're supposed to do, you go to the doctor, you got a prescription, and you fully expect them to get better. But what happens when they don't? What do you do when the medicines we've all trusted for generations just stop working? Well, that is exactly where this story begins. All right, so our story is about a 5-year-old boy and his 9-year-old sister. It all kicks off with symptoms that seem pretty ordinary, but the way this illness fights back is anything but. Okay, look at this timeline. September 1st, the fever starts. Doctors prescribe cefixima, a really common standard antibiotic. The result? Nothing. Absolutely no change. A week goes by, so they switch to azithromycin, another powerful drug. Still nothing. By September 10th, they're in the hospital, and that fever is still raging. Right away, this is a huge red flag. The frontline defenses are failing, and no one knows why. So the medical team goes into full detective mode. And right away, they find a critical clue. The family had just spent 2 months in Pakistan. And get this, a cousin there had been sick with something very similar. The physical exams show an enlarged spleen, swollen lymph nodes, classic signs that the body is fighting a massive invasion. They test for all the usual suspects like dengue and Zika, all negative. The blood work confirms there's a serious infection, but the actual cause is still a total mystery. So with all the common culprits ruled out, the doctors turn to one of the most important tests they have, a blood culture. It's designed to literally grow and identify the exact bacteria that's causing all this trouble. And the results, well, it's alarming. In the lab, technicians are watching as something starts to grow in the culture. This is it, the moment of truth. And there it is, Salmonella typhi. This is the bacteria that causes typhoid fever. But hold on, it's what comes after that name that changes everything. Those letters, BLEE. This isn't your ordinary salmonella. Nope, this is a superbug, and it's armed with a special enzyme that makes it incredibly resistant to our most common antibiotics. So what in the world does BLRE actually mean? And how does a simple bacteria even become a superbug? Let's get into the science of their secret weapons, because it's kind of fascinating. Okay, at its core, antibiotic resistance is basically evolution on hyperspeed. See, bacteria reproduce so incredibly fast that they can develop new survival traits really quickly. So when we use an antibiotic, all the weak, susceptible bacteria die off, but any that have a natural defense survive. They multiply and they pass on those defensive superpowers to the next generation. Now, to get a handle on just how bad this is, we classify resistance into different levels. You've got multidrug-resistant, or MDR, which is already pretty serious. But this salmonella strain was something else. It was classified as XDR, or extensively drug-resistant. That means it's resistant to almost every family of antibiotics in the doctor's toolkit, leaving them with very, very few options. And this is the bacteria's secret weapon. That BLEE actually stands for betalactamase extended spectrum. Let's break that down. Betalactamase is an enzyme, and you can think of it as a tiny pair of molecular scissors. The extended spectrum part means these scissors are really, really good at cutting up a wide range of our antibiotics, including powerful ones like cephalosporins. So when an antibiotic gets close, the bacteria just releases these enzymes and they literally chop the drug to pieces before it can do its job. It's brilliant and terrifying. These enzyme scissors are grouped into 4 main classes: A, B, C, and D. Now for classes A, C, and D, we've actually developed some clever drugs called inhibitors that can basically jam the scissors and stop them from working. But look at class B. That's the real problem. Its scissors are built using metal ions, like zinc, and our current inhibitors just don't work against them. We have no simple counter. This makes class B enzymes one of the single biggest threats we face in modern medicine. Now, it's really important to understand this. This family's nightmare, unfolding in one hospital room, it's not an isolated event, not at all. It's a snapshot of a much larger silent pandemic that is spreading all across the globe. The numbers are just staggering. According to the World Health Organization, as of 2023, 1 out of every 6 bacterial infections on the planet showed resistance to antibiotics. 1 in 6. Just let that sink in. That means common things. Infections after surgery, UTIs, even a scraped knee are getting harder and harder to treat. And this brings us right back to our story. Remember that travel history? It wasn't just a clue. It was the whole story. Pakistan, like many parts of South Asia, has become an epicenter for the evolution of these superbugs. A combination of factors has created the perfect storm, the perfect breeding ground for XDR Salmonella. This chart from a recent analysis, it's just stunning. It shows you how fast our standard treatments are becoming useless there. 80% of Salmonella strains are now resistant to ampicillin, a go-to drug for decades. 64% are resistant to ciprofloxacin, another frontline drug. That means for most people, the first or even second antibiotic they get is probably going to fail. And look at that last bar. A full quarter of all strains are now XDR, just like the one in our story. Doctors are starting out with terrifyingly few options. So, you're the doctor. You're facing a superbug that's already shrugged off multiple powerful drugs. How do you save these two kids? Well, you call in the last line of defense. The doctors turn to a class of antibiotics called carbapenems. The specific drug is called meropenem. These are the heavy hitters, the break glass in case of emergency drugs, reserved for the absolute worst, most resistant infections. And here it works. Within 48 hours, the fever finally breaks. A new blood culture comes back clean. The superbug is gone. The kids make a full recovery. It's a huge sigh of relief, right? A major victory for modern medicine. But that victory, as great as it was, came from using one of our last effective weapons. And it forces us to ask a really terrifying question. What happens when the bacteria learn to resist this too? And that's where we get to the cutting edge of science. The race is on to create new weapons. Scientists are developing these inhibitors that act like bodyguards for our antibiotics. They basically sacrifice themselves to the bacteria's scissors so the real antibiotic can sneak past and do its job. But the biggest challenge, the holy grail, is still out there. Finding a way to defeat those metal-based Class B enzymes. That remains a top priority. This one case, this one family's story, really forces us to look at the bigger picture. It's a warning shot about a future we are rapidly approaching, a future some people are calling the post-antibiotic era. So what's the big takeaway here? First, superbugs mean that a simple infection isn't always so simple anymore. Any bug can become a life-threatening emergency. Second, bacteria don't need passports. This is a global problem, and it demands a global response. Third, we have to be smart about the antibiotics we still have. Using them wisely is just as important as inventing new ones. And finally, this isn't a war we just win. It's a race we have to keep running, forever, pitting our innovation against their evolution. You know, everything we think of as modern medicine, from routine surgeries to cancer chemotherapy to organ transplants, it all relies on our ability to control infections. Antibiotics were arguably the greatest medical breakthrough of the 20th century. The question this case leaves us with is what happens to medicine in the 21st century if we lose them?